Welcome along to Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today I'm going to be taking you on the emotional roller coaster as I see it, going deeper into some of the emotions that both the Perth property investors and the East Coast property investors are bringing into the melting pot that is our market. And if you happen to think that you're a completely logical investor, everything I observe of our clients and myself and everyone else in general would suggest otherwise. So I think it will really help you to get some different perspectives from this podcast and help you become more aware of your investing and the emotions that are out in that marketplace of Perth and any marketplace for investing. So let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialist servicing the whole of Perth. Now here is your host, Jared Mann.
Today I wanted to give you some insights into the emotional side of investing. You don't typically hear other people speaking about it too much, certainly not in property investment circles. And I've found, I guess, over my 12 years of having my agency and chatting with hundreds and hundreds of property investors, the awareness that you can develop in yourself over your own emotions and that of the rest of the market, the better that you can be in touch with those emotions, the greater that you're going to be at investing. In the last 4 years, it's certainly been very rough roller coaster ride for Perth property owners. Until recently, when rents have turned around, we had up until that point had a drop of 22% in the median price of rentals. So a lot of investors having to reduce their rents and not getting the same returns week on week that they were getting. And then over that same time, we've also had the median house price drop 12%. The premium areas have held up pretty well. They've come back 5 to 10% already. And the middle ring suburbs, their values have held pretty firm. But the outer areas dropped by 20+%. So it certainly hasn't been even across the board. So some owners, if they checked in on their price, would have a lot more to worry about, a lot more to get upset about, that their properties aren't worth what they used to be. Now, just to give you some context, we currently manage properties for 700 clients in Perth across 200 suburbs. And over the last year, I went and checked my numbers, and I've had at least 360 of those 700 clients think about selling their investment property. Now, that's a very big percentage, especially when you consider how many of them might have got in it for the long term and were never intending to sell. You know, over 50% is showing you that people are at their absolute low of emotions. And when I speak with most of them, they're fed up, they're, beaten down, and they are at that emotional low point with how their property's performed, and they just want out. If they could get the price to make it worthwhile, they would move on. So it's no coincidence that everyone is feeling this way. They're feeling at their bottom right when the market is also at its bottom and ready for a change. And I've always wondered, is it that the market prices create these feelings in people? Or is it that our feelings create the market prices? And I'm pretty sure it's a bit of both, one feeding the other. So as the market feels a certain way, it gets reflected in prices. And as prices occur, it makes people feel a certain way. So like feeling that there's a real loop between the things there. I guess feel was the word, not thinking. In nature, when I look around as well, and I've really got into this more and more lately with having a garden out the backyard. Don't ask me. You turn mid-30s and you start planting things and getting joy out of seeing them grow. And in nature, there's cycles too, just as there is in our property market. And it's really difficult in nature to go against that cycle. Both, it's the same in property too. It's really difficult to go against the property cycle financially and emotionally, to go against it. Otherwise, we probably all would have been going out and buying up bargains over the last 12 to 18 months. And most investors that I am in touch with haven't been doing that. They've pretty much run for cover, and they're doing the opposite of buying. They're considering selling. Try planting some seedlings in summer in your garden, and even with intense water and keeping them in the shade, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to survive unless it has the right intensive care from you. And unless the plant and you have some reserves to draw on with, putting that additional water on and additional fertilizer, additional care, maybe changing the environment that it's in, supporting it intensely in the meantime. So it pretty much takes a lot more skill as a gardener to give that attention to have a successful, seedling grow up to being a plant and survive through summer. And likewise, even though the majority of our clients have run for cover and understandably have, there's, some very highly skilled investors that we work with that have done very well throughout the last 4 to 5 years. And they haven't had much other competition from other investors in the market too. So it's been a lot easier for them to find properties because there's a lot more supply. There's very little competition. Sellers were being a lot more negotiable on terms, and they could get quite creative about longer settlement periods and subject to development approvals and these types of things that becoming a lot harder to get accepted today, especially in any of the hot areas. So these investors that did have that extra skill and that, more control over their emotions during this time, they've typically bought very well below market value, and they've added value to gain equity. And then they've bought in, the resilient and quality areas that aren't dropping in price, that have at least shown that they're stabilizing and if not coming back earlier than others. And all of this goes to insulating themselves so that they can do well regardless of the market being down. So just imagine for a second how well these investors, these very intentional investors, are going to do when things starts going up again. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier. Now, we haven't missed the boat, all the rest of us. There is still plenty of time to get on board. The recovery is only just starting. But a lot of us have actually forgotten what it's like to experience growth in prices in the Perth property market. And it feels like it's been so long that I myself am also in almost a state of disbelief when I start seeing it happen. And you can also see that disbelief out in the market too. And believe me and my wife have been looking for a home now more intensively for 3 to 4 months, but on and off for 6 months. And at the moment, time and time again, I'm in disbelief at what people are paying for price. And there's a few people that keep coming over the top of the other offers that are in place. And, many investors also don't believe that the market's already growing again. So I remember back hearing stories from the buyers agents and also property investors that I know over in Sydney and Melbourne. And this would be 4 to 5 years ago now, where they were in a very flat and down market. And they were all at their emotional low, thinking that they'd been forgotten by the market and they couldn't believe that it was going to come back. And even when it started to come back, they didn't believe it was happening. And of course, we've all seen what's happened over there on the East Coast. Many areas then it went on to nearly double over the last 5 years. And so the emotions of, people definitely change. They definitely, go with the market as well. And following on from this, I guess, emotional and financial high that all of the investors and property owners over East have, we're really seeing the East Coast investors a lot more confident coming into our market in Perth. And they're coming in, buying investment properties, some of them sight unseen, And it's not the locals at the moment that are buying investment properties for the most part. It's mainly those from over east. They've got the equity to spend because they've had the growth in their properties over there. And they believe in it more than we do, funnily enough. They can see things from afar. They can see all the news, the media, the predictions. They can see, basic stats that show that we are around in recovery and it's not stopping. And we're the most primed spot for investment in Australia. So most of us locals here in Perth, don't have the spare cash or equity to invest again yet. And even if we do, what I'm sensing among all of my friends, and many of them are in the engineering world, so, they're on pretty good incomes. They've been saving and putting their spare cash aside. And this year, we've certainly haven't had other luxuries to spend things on. Everyone's been parking cash in their accounts because they haven't had holidays to take. But the priority for the majority of people that I speak to is, especially around my age, mid-30s to mid-40s, is on upgrading their homes at the moment. So that's what's fueling the surge towards quality family homes, that segment of our market at the moment. If they do have the cash, they're choosing to upgrade their home. And it does make sense because, you've only got so much money to spread around. And if you want to get into good school zones before either high school or your kids get into primary school, then you're going to make the move now on this side of the recovery, because we'll be likely be paying 30 to 50% more on the other side of the recovery. I guess I'd really love to see more of the Perth locals who can, have the money to invest, get into our market now and start looking at it more seriously, because it's a shame that most of the gains and the biggest upside is going to be for outside East Coast investors. I certainly welcome them into our state, and what goes around comes around. So many Perth investors do also look abroad. But at the very, very least, I'd suggest that certainly our clients look to keep their investment properties that they've fought so hard to hold over the last few years, so that they too can see how good it feels when prices increase and hopefully surpass our previous highs, and only ever look to sell if they've got a real reason that makes sense to sell. So why might you want to sell? Well, if you do need that money back or borrowing capacity back to upgrade your home, that's a good reason. If you think that the money can be invested better elsewhere, that's always another good reason to look at it. And if the property happens to be costing you too much, really look into what you can do to increase rents once the moratorium ends on the 28th of March. Look at, have you got a depreciation schedule to make sure you're claiming as much back on tax as possible? Have you lodged a tax variation so you're getting it back along the way? And what's your interest rate, which is the other biggest one? You may consider locking in for a period of 2 or 3 years. If you are going to hold it out over the next recovery period, you can lock in high 1% or low 2%, and you should be paying under 3%. So look at all those things before you decide to sell. If you are going to sell, sure, it's better than 6 or 12 months ago, but what might you be missing out on in the 2 to 3 years ahead if you do? So hang in there for the ride, and remember in a few years' time that this roller coaster won't keep going up forever, and we've got to start to think about managing our emotions on the other side of this recovery too. Keep that in mind. Until next time, see you then.